Redditors with intellectually disabled parents. What was it like? When did you realize something was different? What would you want other people to know about your experience? One of the most heartbreaking things I heard from a friend who is a guardian ad litem was about a somewhat mentally handicapped from B. The mom passed away from pancreatic cancer, and after some signs of issues, a health and welfare check was pretty rough. The kids drank nothing but soda. Dad hadn't taken them to a scheduled doctor's appointment because he couldn't figure out the bus schedules. Nothing terrible, but I guess after evaluation, the guy wasn't just not competent to look after kids, he couldn't really look after himself, even with his best effort. Ultimately, the kids ended up with some family friends, and dad in a group home. My friend was crying as he told the story because even though dad is allowed to see them pretty frequently, at the time of the court stuff, he plainly didn't understand that and completely broke down like he was losing the last people he cared about. From what I gather in general, most cases don't even end that well. Lots of kids end up either neglected or unintentionally abused. In worse cases, intentionally abusive people seek out low-functioning parents with the notion of abusing kids, parents, or both. It's like losing someone you never realized you would miss. I never realized that the way I understood her wasn't the way she was understood by most people. I realized that something was different when I started observing other people's reactions to her. It's losing a confidant because you don't have that parent you would go to for advice because they can't grasp the depth of what you're telling them. If I wanted to convey something about that experience, it is don't give up on them. And that knowing what I know now, I wouldn't fix that about my mom even if I could, because then she wouldn't be my mom. With you 100% on this. Other people don't understand her the way I do, but they don't love her like I do. And that's okay. For all of us. 3. My dad has a very low IQ with multiple learning disabilities. Graduated HS when he was almost 21. This was in the 60s after they kept moving him to different schools after he'd flunk. He worked 7 odd jobs at a time while I was growing up. Bus driver, delivery man, cashier, volunteer firefighter that only drove the truck. You get the idea. Nice guy, but can't think for himself, can't read well either. And watching TV he could only watch USA or TNT, and half the time he'd still misunderstand the plot. I knew something was different when both of my parents were always involved at my school. Neither had a career. They literally worked odd jobs that friends gave them as handouts so we could survive. My mom was a lunch lady for a bit. My dad drove a school bus. He'd tell me stuff the kids would do to him and he never understood why they made fun of him. He'd get angry and then forget all about it. My brother and I did all of the household chores growing up: laundry, cleaning, even cooking. My mom is capable but lazy, and didn't know what cooking was if it didn't come from a box. We grew up on mac and cheese and really bad TV dinner, like kid cuisine. Now my dad is 70 and still drives a bus, has no retirement, has no real savings. His body is falling apart and he never keeps up with any physical therapy. My mom watches my kids. She's learned a ton by living with me, has lost weight, learned to cook healthy, etc. Not sure if this is what you mean, but yeah, I realized my dad wasn't very bright at a young age, but he always tried his best to do right by his family, be there when it counted. I still do everything with technology for him. He loves his iPhone, but we had to make sure he understood what ads were really quick. He was very upset at his bill and didn't realize he was buying things. Thought he needed his login and other stuff to use all games. Didn't know about the free ones. Whoops. See below for additional details. There really is so much more that I guess I never realized was so different because of his low intelligence. Holy crap. Gold. Jeez. Thanks guys. My dad's just a guy going through life the best he can with what he has. Kid cuisine. The official food of growing up in less than favorable circumstances. My mother has a very low IQ. I sort of became an adult as a child and served as a parent figure to my younger sister. My grandparents helped so much. I would have been lost without them. This is basically me. I'm done with my mother now though. Don't talk to her anymore. Never had a single nice thing to say, is racist, and just an all-around horrible person. Starting telling me and my partner she would be a better mother to my son than we are. This is coming from a woman who used to take me round see kids' houses at 8 years old. I work with special needs children. One of the children on my caseload is a lovely little 3-year-old who is presenting with some significant developmental delays. Generally, we wouldn't diagnose with an intellectual disability until children are older. Her parents both have cognitive delays. They also both clearly love and adore their daughter. She's always well dressed and clean and, while she can struggle to make connections with others, has a strong connection with both of them. Her parents both come to every single meeting or appointment I set up for them. Still, it's important for other people to be accommodating of the parents, just like we are accommodating of the daughter's delays, extra meetings and really breaking things down so the parents can understand. Family members stepping in and attending the more difficult meetings with them to help clarify things further. The dad recently lost his job and the girl's teacher is allowing her to stay at school tuition free. It takes a village, and it's important just because someone may be differently abled that we don't pull back and instead push forward with more help. When I was 9, my dad was diagnosed with a brain tumor. After both surgery and extended chemotherapy, neither of which really helped, he could no longer make the kind of decisions any adult could do. For example, one day he needed to pick up some medicine from a clinic 10 miles away rather than waiting 1 hour for my mum to come home from work and drive him. He decided to walk, despite the fact that it was freezing and heavily raining. Luckily, my uncle happened to be driving by and drove him. One of the worst things was that it would lapse. One day he would make a joke about having a scar from his surgery for a Halloween costume, and the next day he would mistake my older brother for his brother. They do not look alike or have similar accents. Mostly he didn't know that he was making mistakes, but occasionally he would realize, and that was so much worse. When he couldn't remember the name of a man he'd known nearly his whole life, or when he called for the family dog and then remembered that she had died in his arms 2 years before. Those times were difficult. He died when I was 12. The grief and guilt doesn't go away. I always wonder if we just caught it sooner, if there was a red flag we missed. I'm telling anyone who reads this, if someone you know starts exhibiting signs of dementia at an age much younger than they should, or if their ability to carry out tasks that should be routine for them, i.e. driving, navigating or mathematics, please get a professional's opinion. Please don't feel guilty. You are a child. So many mild neurological symptoms can be explained away. He's tired. He doesn't feel well. He's under a lot of stress. That sort of thing. My father suffered a brain aneurysm about 5 years ago. His biggest issue is he lost his ability to speak and do things like use the computer. His speech is mostly garbled. He gets frustrated because he knows what he wants to say. He also has some mobility and vision difficulties. The hardest thing for us is seeing him go from a very social and always traveling retiree to a man who doesn't want to leave the house. I miss hearing from him very frequently. Obligatory not me boo it. When I was 15, a new family moved in across the street. A wife, husband, and their, then, 3-year-old son. The husband has mental delays. Wife has mental delays and physical disabilities. Their son is of sound mind and body. Like one poster, his dad isn't really capable of construing his own thoughts on any subject and is heavily influenced by other people. His mother, while delayed, is a bit more capable in thought processes, but her voice is affected by her abilities. Because of this, their son wasn't really parented. His mom was capable of all housework, cooking, cleaning, and his dad has held a job as a janitorial service for several businesses and a cart collector at the Big W for 15 plus years. All of that though thanks to a wonderful service we have here for the disabled. Anyway, their son wasn't parented and therefore pretty much ran around doing whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. His dad never wanted to let his son down by telling him number. As the son grew, his schooling got worse. He played football in middle and high school. He was given an IEP because, while he's mentally and physically capable, his parents weren't able to teach him or give him good study habits, so he was a bit slower to catch on to things than others. Cue in us. Their son started coming over to my house for help with simple things. We helped teach him how to ride a bike. We helped with his homework. We accompanied his parents to parent-teacher conferences. He asked us to help him learn how to cook, to do laundry, to drive. When he was old enough, we helped fill out work applications and college applications. His parents are very present in his life, but they're more like friends to him than anything else. While we tried our best to help in every way that we could, he never really learned that drive to strive for the things he wants. He's in his early 20s now and it seems he's finally maturing enough to make big decisions for himself. He still goes to my parents for advice on the huge things though. Really cool of you and your parents to be so helpful. IDK if this counts, but my dad is dyslexic. He grew up in an abusive home and his mom always told him he would grow up to be a ditch digger. Dyslexia wasn't understood at the time, so he was illiterate for most of his schooling. When he was younger he was held back and considered to be retarded. When he graduated he joined the military and slowly accrued college credits. After he retired from the military he went for his master's. He is now an educator. It was always talked about growing up, and he always took time to work on reading and math skills with me and my siblings. He was very supportive of education. My childhood home was filled with books. I hate that he faced so much adversity, but I'm incredibly proud of him for all that he has accomplished. I grew up in a highly dysfunctional and psychologically abusive environment because of it. It's something that I've struggled with my entire life. Although my father is intellectually disabled, he is also manipulative, selfish, and entitled. I'm also an only child, so I always felt extremely alone in my situation. Although I have overcome the struggles I faced due to it, and have moved away and keep extremely minimal contact, I still have nightmares about him and living in that household. What hurts the most is knowing that my mother is still unwillingly living there with him due to her poor financial circumstances. It's just an all-around terrible situation. Oh man, I could write a novel on this. I love my mother dearly, I really do. I always preface talking about her with that, because if I don't and talk about her, it's easy for me to sound like I don't. I knew she was off my whole life. She didn't drive or work growing up. She apparently did before I was born, but after me, nope. She would lurk at the top of the stairs when my friends were over, just watching creepily. She'd always get incredibly jealous whenever my father paid me any attention. She'd say that he shouldn't try to buy my love when getting me anything I needed or wanted. Looking back, it was jealousy. He is normal, but he always resented her for changing after they got married. I think he was blind to how she really was. They were only dating for 6 weeks before getting engaged. I came 3 years later and I'm the oldest, so it wasn't that. What was tough was how he always pressed her to do more, and she'd always promise, but nothing would ever happen. So my dad would resent her, and I did the same growing up. I was mean because I didn't understand why she was different. I blamed her for not working, and why we weren't as well off as her sister's family. My aunt is a therapist and her husband is a doctor, while my father is much more blue collar. Even today, she can't ever admit she does anything wrong. Not in a narcissistic way though. She literally can't comprehend when she's wrong. When she's caught in a lie, she'll just change her story and not acknowledge she was ever saying anything else. I have a son, and when she watches him, I've quizzed her a dozen times how to make formula, 1 scoop for 2 ounces, and she can't remember and she always gets it wrong. What would I want other people to know? It's hard. I regret being so mean to her as a kid. I just didn't understand. I still get frustrated sometimes, but I have to constantly remind myself she's as good as she can be. She can't hold any intellectual conversation. She'll just repeat what the last person said, or occasionally ask a question that was answered by what the person before her said. It's how she participates. But no one I know has a bigger heart, or can keep track of how people are related to each other or of dates of family members' birthdays or death dates like she can. It's so strange how part of her brain just doesn't work. Intelligence, but certain parts like love and family memory is the best of anyone I've ever known. My mum and dad are deaf and were never educated. It was always a struggle. I was their advocate for my entire childhood, helping them in every day, so I was robbed of a childhood. They can't understand basic concepts and anything even remotely complex, so I've never had an actual conversation with them. It breaks my heart every day. My dad has an ABI, acquired brain injury, similar to a TB, traumatic brain injury, but rather than caused by trauma like a blow to the head, it can be caused by something like 30 years of excessive drinking. In my dad's case, same symptoms as a TB, such as forgetfulness, inappropriate behavior, and inability to understand social cues. I thought my dad was just in butthole or was secretly still drinking. I'm in my 30s and I just realized he had an actual brain injury about 6 months ago. He has been sober for about 5 years. I'm a yoga teacher and did a training with a wonderful organization called Love Your Brain, which trains teachers to work with individuals who have TBs. After I completed the training and taught my first class series, I got feedback from my boss about how I seemed very comfortable working with that population even though I had never done it before. I was like, well, I have years of experience dealing with my dad. It's pretty much the same. A big light bulb moment. I spent a lot of time being embarrassed by my dad when he was drunk and then still embarrassed by him when he got sober. He can be very hard to talk to because he changes topics mid-sentence, is a terrible listener, and will forget much of what you say. In public he'll make inappropriate comments about other people or suddenly start speaking excessively loudly. If you tell him to stop, he will, but it's clear he doesn't understand what he did wrong. He can't live on his own, and even though my parents are divorced, my mom is constantly checking up on him. We were estranged due to his drinking for many years, and once he got sober I hope to have a chance for a real relationship with him. But that's not going to happen the way I thought it was. I'm not going to have a father figure. Heck, if I call him to ask a question about my car, there's a 50/50 chance he'll instead choose to tell me about a sandwich he ate last week. It's okay. I'm dealing with it. I'm choosing instead to work on whatever type of relationship it's possible for us to have now. My mom has erotomania. Basically illusions of grandeur. I honestly can't even talk to her. I just keep things really short with her. There is no logic with these types of people. No matter what proof you have, they will never listen. I don't know if I deal with it right, but I barely speak to her. My dad was severely injured when I was about 6 months old. My sister, who is 10 years older than me, remembers pre-injury dad, but the whole time I was alive he couldn't really function within society. He has no social skills. His motor skills are pretty bad, and he is quite a freaking prick, but it's the dad I got. My mom worked 3 jobs sometimes and he went on social security sometime when I was a kid. He'd have nightly seizures, and due to the brain damage he's sometimes quite confused about what decade it is, as he goes back to the time frame when he was injured, 1988. He calls our dog by the dog they had when I was born's name, has no idea who I am, and panics like he has to go to work. It's kind of comical. But as us kids have started having partners who get exposed to this stuff, they freak out when it happens. To me it's just like, oh, dad's having a seizure again. He'll snap out of it in a moment and they're like, why are you not doing anything about this? I've worked with many people with learning disabilities with children. I find that most can do the basic stuff with babies when shown how to, but then struggle to understand a baby's changing needs, which if not supported properly can lead to neglect. The other thing I noticed is that when a child reaches teenagers, they often become young carers for the parents and need to provide emotionally or practically. In summary, many parents will need support throughout the time they raise children. This is a little different than what you asked for, but I work with developmentally disabled adults. Some of them believe they have children, wives, etc. They don't. It's incredibly sad to hear them tell stories about their children when the children don't exist. A lot of them have been abused. One of my guys was raped repeatedly by his bus driver when he was 13-17. He thought it was normal, so he didn't tell anyone until we had a discussion as a group about boundaries when he was approximately 35. I may be a year or so off, but they really can't understand things the way we do. They are incredibly likely to be abused and misused. My uncle is high-functioning autistic, and he's convinced he has a girlfriend. She's been with him since high school, and she's coming back from Colorado any day now because the economy is better under Trump. It's really sad. My mom had a severe stroke when she was 24. I was 3. My dad sent my brother off to first grade, and, being 3, I was to stay home with my mom. I thought she was sleeping in, but then she wouldn't wake up. I tried to make her sandwiches, ketchup sandwiches, and bring her water. My brother came home from school and called my grandma. My mom had been actively having a stroke for over 10 hours. It's actually my first memory. Needless to say, that stroke caused irreparable damage to her brain. The doctors were certain she'd die, but she pulled through. After her stroke, she couldn't remember that she was a mom. She didn't remember she married my dad. She couldn't talk, walk, or write. She lived in a rehabilitation center for years while my dad worked to afford it. My dad was crushed by the stress of it all, and he would lash out at all of us. He'd work late to pay her medical bills while leaving my 7-year-old brother to watch me. We didn't have any close relatives to help. He'd come home drunk and angry almost every night. Then my mom came home when I was in kindergarten. She still couldn't walk or even remember my brother or my names. She had the same cognitive abilities as I did. We did our writing homework and practiced reading together. I could speak better than she could, but I never thought any of it was strange. I thought most moms didn't care about their kids' birthdays and names. She never attended school functions or met my teachers. She didn't tell me she loved me until I graduated high school. I can remember the first time I had a friend over in middle school. When they were leaving, they asked what was wrong with my mom. They couldn't understand her, they said, and they found her shaking creepy. That's when I realized she wasn't normal. It messed me up. Suddenly everything made sense. Most moms were more mature than their children and could teach them things, but our roles were reversed. People outside my immediate family still can't understand her, not even my boyfriend of 5 years. She's always sick, angry, or depressed. It's been a hard road. The icing on the cake? I inherited the same disease that caused her stroke. I'm terrified it will happen to me too. This will probably get buried, but finally something I can talk about. We always knew my dad was a little different growing up, but as a kid it's tough to know what's normal and what isn't. As we got older, he became more and more fixated on certain things, set in his ways, and his one-track mind became more and more difficult to derail, especially when he was angry. He would violently lash out or scream when a noise was decidedly too loud. If he believes something is to be a certain way, that isn't his opinion of that situation. To him it is true fact and there is no other conceivable way about it. He would often put us, his family, in very dangerous situations because of a fixation. For example, he often saw things discarded on the side of the highway that he just had to have. In these scenarios, he would stop the vehicle dead in the middle of the road, get out, leave his car door wide open, and leisurely walk to retrieve the item. Yesterday, even, I said to my mother, it amazes me that I've made it to 24 years old without being killed while he's driving. When I was about 14 my mom sat me down and explained that he was bipolar. When I was 17 he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Now at 24 we realize that his biggest personality influencer is his Asperger's syndrome. He lost his job when I was 18 and is now in the midst of a full-blown hoarding situation. It breaks my heart because he has no money, spends what little money he does have on stupid things to expand his hoard, and stalks my mother every day because he sees her as one of his possessions. We play family as best as we can because we realize how much it means to him to belong. I love him so much, but know our world is going to come crashing down one day very soon. I can sorta add to this. My mother is off. I couldn't tell you what she has because she's only ever seen one doctor about it. They told her she had ADHD and she refused to take the medication. She's also not very intelligent. Things were alright with my mother for a long time. We got along well. We fought a little, in hindsight way more than we should have, and things, mostly, went okay. She was a single mother and the boyfriend of the year cliché doesn't miss the mark by much. However, she went to rehab while I was in year 12. I was about 17, because she had a bad gambling problem and had stolen money off the government. It was either that or jail. She used pot on a regular basis but mostly held down jobs and did okay. Since then she has only gotten worse. She runs a Facebook group. It's basically a cult, and thinks she's going to make millions off of it. She is anti-vacuum, anti-government, believes she sees aliens in vision, and frankly at this point is so self-absorbed I struggle to spend any quality time with her. She gaslights anyone who tells her she is wrong, with evidence or without, and then goes on a crying rant about how no one shows her respect. To say my relationship with my mother is strained is considerably downplaying it. As for my advice, none of it is feel-good advice. If you're trapped at home with someone like that, learn to close yourself off from them. Don't ever get your hopes up and literally just wait until you can separate yourself from them. Be careful not to become cynical and used to being along. That's just as bad as being crushed constantly, so you have to maintain a balance. Don't let your family try and tell you that things are normal when it's clear that they are not. Learn how properly function families work and try and emulate that where you can. Try and figure out how stable romantic relationships are built so that you don't have to learn via trial and error. Keep visits with them short and sweet. Never feel like you owe them anything. It's natural to love your parents and want to help them. And if they are asking for reasonable help and you can do it, go for it. But people like my mother will suck you dry and spit you out. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.